everyone's talking about it. The US dollar strength, the future of the dollar, dollar dominance, or US dollar update. But here's the truth. The dollar isn't dying, it's winning quietly. For months, headlines warned of financial doom. Experts claimed global trade would abandon the US dollar, that America's debts would crush its currency. But as the panic spread, something unexpected happened. The dollar got stronger. The very system everyone said was collapsing began pulling the world back in. This is not just about money, it's about power. The same power that built empires, crushed rivals, and rewrote the world economy time and time again. And if history tells us anything, it's this. Currencies don't die easily. Empires do. But only after they've taught the world how to use their money. So before you believe the collapse stories, let's trace the truth. From the gold coins of ancient empires to the digital dollars defining today's world. Because the so-called dollar collapse, it's a myth. And here's why the dollar is strengthening. Long before the United States ever printed a single dollar, other empires ruled through money. In Rome, silver coins carried the face of Caesar and the authority of an empire that stretched across continents. Trade flowed through those coins like blood through veins. When Rome fell, it wasn't swords that ended it. It was debt, inflation, and a crumbling trust in its own currency. Centuries later, Venice took the stage. The ducat, a small gold coin, became the passport of global trade. Then Spain's silver pieces of 8 powered a new empire, built on conquest and colonial mines in the New World. By the 1700s, Britain rose to power. The pound sterling became the world's backbone, its value anchored by gold and the might of the British Navy. Wherever the Union Jack flew, the pound followed. But like Rome and Spain before it, Britain's reach eventually exceeded its grasp. Wars, debts, and global exhaustion after World War II shattered its financial dominance. And from those ashes, a new empire rose, armed not with fleets or colonies, but with factories, innovation, and trust. The United States, and its weapon was the dollar's strength and its future. After World War II, the world needed stability. Nations were bankrupt, currencies shattered, economies fragile. In 1944, global leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to rebuild the global economy. Out of that meeting came a decision that would shape the next century. The US dollar would become the anchor of the global economy and the new world reserve currency. Why? Because America had 2/3 of the world's gold, the strongest industrial base, and unmatched credibility. The deal was simple. The dollar was backed by gold, and every other currency was backed by the dollar. This was the foundation of Bretton Woods. Trust the dollar and you trust the world. Even after 1971, when President Nixon ended gold convertibility, the system didn't collapse. Instead, the dollar evolved. It became something even more powerful, the first fully digital global reserve currency. Oil contracts were priced in dollars, and this petrodollar system cemented its power. International trade settled in dollars. Debt, investment, and central bank reserves, all in dollars. The greenback became oxygen, invisible, everywhere, essential for global finance. And as decades passed, no currency, not the euro, not the yen, not even the Chinese yuan, could truly replace it or challenge dollar dominance. But every empire, every system has its moment of doubt. And that's why everyone is asking, is the dollar collapsing now? Early this year, the dollar stumbled. Headlines warned of a dollar collapse, pointing to U.S. debt levels, political division, and rising inflation. News of a weakening dollar and the greenback losing global trust flooded the airwaves. But the story wasn't that simple. Yes, the dollar fell briefly, but it wasn't a collapse. It was a correction. A moment of global market rebalancing after aggressive monetary policy, wars, and uncertainty. And just as panic set in, the numbers started to turn. The dollar index, DXY, which measures the dollar's strength against other currencies, began a dollar rally, rising consistently. While social media shouted dollar collapse, savvy investors saw the correction and were buying. Hedge funds moved back into U.S. assets, and global reserves increased their holdings. The narrative was wrong. Why? Because when the world gets nervous, it still runs home to safety. And that safety still has a name. The US dollar, the world's most trusted safe haven currency. Money is not metal or paper, it's trust. The belief that tomorrow, someone else will value it the same way you do today. And in a world where currencies are manipulated, restricted, or controlled, the dollar remains the most trusted. It's not perfect, but it's transparent, liquid, and globally accepted. When a company in Brazil trades with a firm in Singapore, they don't settle in yuan or rupees, they settle in dollars because everyone knows what a dollar is worth. That trust wasn't built overnight, it was earned through decades of stability, rule of law, and credibility. When crisis hits, whether it's a war in Europe, political turmoil in Asia, or a pandemic, global investors rush towards safety. And safety doesn't mean gold anymore. It means U.S. Treasury bonds, debt backed by the dollar. Every time the world trembles, money flows into America. That's not weakness, that's dominance. Even when critics scream collapse, their own countries buy more U.S. bonds. The very people predicting the end of the dollar invest in it. Because in moments of chaos, trust isn't just valuable, it's priceless. The biggest myth in the dollar collapse narrative is that there's a ready replacement waiting. There isn't. The euro, though stable, represents a fractured region with no unified fiscal policy. The Chinese yuan? Controlled, restricted, and politically risky. Gold? Too slow for modern trade. Crypto? Volatile and unregulated. No other currency combines liquidity, convertibility, global reach, and institutional depth like the dollar. If the dollar were to vanish tomorrow, global finance wouldn't move forward. It would freeze. That's not power you lose overnight. The dollar's strength is hardwired into the energy system. Oil, natural gas, and most commodities are priced in dollars. This petrodollar system means every country, from Saudi Arabia to South Korea, needs dollars to buy energy. That constant global demand creates an unbreakable cycle. Trade drives dollar use reinforces trade. Even nations that criticize U.S. dominance quietly keep their reserves in dollars because their economies depend on it. The world might not love the dollar, but it needs it. The dollar's foundation isn't just finance, it's innovation. America leads in technology, intellectual property, and global capital markets. From Silicon Valley to Wall Street, its ecosystem attracts investment, talent, and money from across the planet. As long as the world's most valuable companies are American, the dollar remains the language of value. Breaking point. What if the dollar really collapsed? Let's imagine, for a moment, the nightmare scenario people love to predict. The dollar currency collapses. Confidence vanishes. Global markets panic. What happens next? Trade stops. International loans default. Debt markets freeze. Savings evaporate overnight because 60% of global reserves and 88% of foreign exchange transactions are tied to the dollar. If the dollar truly fell, it wouldn't just be America that suffered. It would be the entire world. That's the secret the collapse prophets never mention. The system is too interconnected to let the dollar die suddenly. The cost would be unbearable. That's why, when things get rough, everyone returns to the same anchor, the same foundation, the same green paper that built modern global finance. The dollar doesn't collapse, it recalibrates. The dollar's recovery this year wasn't an accident. It was proof. Proof that strength isn't about perfection, it's about endurance. While other currencies faltered, the dollar adapted. When inflation surged, America tightened policy. When growth slowed, it rebalanced. The market didn't reward panic, it rewarded resilience. Behind every percentage point of the dollar's rise was a message: confidence. The world still believes in the U.S. system, not because it's flawless, but because it's reliable. And in finance, reliability is power. History repeats itself, but it rhymes differently each time. Rome's coins, Britain's pound. America's dollar. Each symbolized a civilization at its peak. Each was tested by war, inflation, and internal division. And yet, the real collapse didn't come from outside enemies, it came from within. Rome fell not when its enemies breached the walls, but when it lost faith in its own system. Britain's decline began not when the pound weakened, but when the empire's will to lead faded. So the true threat to the dollar isn't China, or debt, or digital currencies. It's complacency, it's division, it's forgetting what made it strong in the first place. The moment America stops innovating, stops producing, stops believing in its own stability, that is when the dollar will truly be at risk. Until then, the rest of the world can talk about collapse all they want. But every night they still price their oil, their goods, and their savings in dollars. So here's what this all means. Truth number 1. The dollar's collapse is not a fall. It's a fluctuation. Power breathes, it doesn't vanish. Truth number 2. No empire keeps its currency strong forever, but the U.S. hasn't reached that breaking point yet. It's still the world's benchmark for safety and stability. Truth number 3. What collapses first isn't currency, it's confidence. The moment people stop believing in the system, history shifts. But right now, that belief still belongs to the dollar. The US dollar doesn't just represent America. It represents the idea that the world still needs a common language of trade, trust, and value. So the next time someone tells you the dollar is collapsing, remember, if it were true, the world would already be burning. The dollar hasn't fallen. It's simply reminded us who's still in charge.